If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to be notified of future videos. Thank you.
Hello Internet, we are back and we've got General Jock here, wonderful fellow. We're just laughing here in the background because I forgot his name. Not my fault, I apologize to you sir, everybody else. We can forget about the man. Anyway, we are back now and we're carrying on with his life. As I understand, he's a young officer and now I think the fun starts. So thank you sir, welcome back here. We appreciate your time. Over to you.
Hi, morning, Koos. Thanks for the next opportunity. This is round 2. I'm not going to repeat the sequence in which I'm going to talk, but I'm now going to Grahamstown. I've now become an assistant VeldKornet, ready for action, and I've been posted to 5SAI. That was in March 1965. But Koos, if you will allow me, there's just a few things that I want to say about the first episode that we had when I was at the Army Gymnasium. At the end of that year, 1964, 3 staff sergeants, earlier the year, they went on an officer's course. And just before we cleared out in 1964, they returned to the base and we applauded them because they'd become VeldKornets, 2 pips. And that was L.E. Jordan, VeldKornet then, and then a VeldKornet ex-staff sergeant, Hans Koetsier. He had a very prominent nose, so sy naam was Hans Koetsier. And then another very famous character in my career anyway, was then VeldKornet ex-staff sergeant P.V. Koekemoer, Petrus Willems Koekemoer. And the 3 of them played a major role in mentoring my career. So I just want to mention that that's when they became officers. And then I also very quickly, last session, I touched on Chris Schulenburg, where I very sort of nonchalantly said he'd been awarded some or other. I want to repeat that. If Chris ever looks at this, I want to repeat it. He was given in the Rhodesian Army the highest award that you could get, and that was the Grand Cross of Valor. He also received the Silver Cross for Rhodesia. So I'm sorry, Chris, if I just sort of ran over that. But one little story I want to tell about Chris Schulenburg quickly. I can't remember after all these years if we were together on a course or if we were together on some or other conference. It was in the late 70s, middle 70s, late 70s, before Rhodesia closed down in 1980. And somebody said to us, Chris Schulenburg, he's back in town, that's in Pretoria, and that he's opened a little pub close to the Paul Kruger, the Pretoria, sê maar die Binnestad. And we found out where it was, and on one Friday night, we decided to go and visit him. It was a small little pub. It was almost a little crack in the wall. Had a counter and a few little tables in it. And we said we went in one at a time. This was everybody that used to be with Chris in the gymnasium. And I think Piet Moelman was the first to go in, and we were looking through the curtains. And Chris Schulenburg couldn't believe what he saw. A groot omhelsing and a pikkie trane. And then we all went in one at a time, about 5 minutes apart from each other. And that ripped that Chris apart, absolutely apart. So Chris Schulenburg, as jy hierdie kyk, ons onthou nog hy storie toe ons jou verbaas het. Then I must just also repeat that so many things I've got available. The stuff that we're talking about here now is just sort of scratching the top of the iceberg. There's photos that I haven't even gone through yet, that they're lying somewhere in trommels. I'm not sure if people have written proper histories of the units that I'm talking about. They obviously have written somewhere, but I can't find them on internet. So I'm going to be saying a lot of things here where I might have a date or 2 wrong, and help me that I don't leave out a couple of names that were very prominent. But in the beginning, I want to say from now onwards, if I've left out any names, I haven't done that because I don't like you anymore. You guys played one massive role in my military career, and I thank you for that. If I have missed out your name, and you see this, come down and say at the bottom here, hey, Harris, jy het my vergeet, ek was ook daar by jou gewees. If you don't mind. Right. Now we go across to 6SAI. I'm now an assistant VeldKornet, PX 575517, and I'm ready for action. I must say that unless we've forgotten, the military in those days was based solely on the British organization. Our organizations were British. Our uniforms were British. Besides the R1s, the rest of our weapons were British. So this was a very British affair, very solemn British affair, discipline and the works. So there I am. I'm now ready to start off. So on my return from the gym to Port Elizabeth, I remember buying 2 charcoal trousers, size 30. It's not 30 anymore. I don't know why. 2 white shirts and the rest. These matched perfectly with my only other item of clothing, namely the gym blazer and tie, a beautiful blazer. I haven't got one anymore, and I haven't seen one in years. Maybe somebody can show us what a gym blazer looks like. Dressed in this, I went to the traffic department to get my driver's license. In those days, if you had an army license, they took you around the block and they issued you with a license, QED. There was a booze representative at Castle Wine and Brandy where my mom used to work. His name was Ross Scott. I think he's still alive. Who happened to be on his way to East London via Grahamstown on the 4th of March, 1965. So civvies in a suitcase, short back and sides, so I thought. I left Port Elizabeth on my long military career, aged 18 years and 6 months. Excuse me, bietjie aan borstig vanoggend. On arriving at the main gate at 6SAI, I was told where the headquarters was and took a deep breath and proceeded through the lines to the office of the adjutant, 1 VeldKornet Jan Hendrik Hofmeyer Smit. Baie mense sal hom ook nog onthou. On arriving at his open door, he glanced up from the desk and asked who the hell I was. He already knew of my arrival, and the question was only to make me feel welcome, I'm sure. I introduced myself. Sorry, Chris, can you hear that beep beep? I'll have to put that off. Yeah. I'm not going to go out here now. I'm just going to put it off. The lights have gone off again.
No problem. In South Africa, we understand. I have to say to you people, I actually thought it was my fault. I have this battery here. No, our battery was, what do you call it, speaker. And as you can see, it's running a bit low on power, so I thought it was making that noise. I was holding it like this to find out. Yeah, funny. You know, that's life. That's life.
No, yeah, let's hope that stays well. We're another 2 hours in the dark. Yes, so there I arrived at the adjutant's office. So he looks at me, he says, wie's jy? I said who I was. He said, voor jy met die bevelvoerder praat, gestay jou hare. So off I went down to the YMCA, and a lot of the guys will remember the barber was then, let me just get it right here, down to the barber, Steve. It was short back and sides. I was brought on my first officer commanding orders in the permanent force. And after meeting the OC, I produced to the officers' mess where Leon Wessels, Dan Kershoff, Neppies Nepgen, Mortar, Smiley Stride were already sorting out themselves. By the way, the officer commanding was Commandant Hector Norton. He was also a Second World War veteran, and he could only salute up to here because he had shrapnel through his elbow. And everybody can remember Hector Norton only saluting halfway up because it's as far as he could salute. These names I've just mentioned, yeah, Mortar, also came from the Army Gymnasium. And he later also went to 42 Flight, which was the Army's own reconnaissance squadron. Then he joined the Air Force. En toe word Le Monde 'n baie berugte en beroemde vlamgat, soos ons sê. He was flying jets. Leon Wessels and I shacked up in the same room as we had to share until we became a bit more senior in the unit. The previous year's army contingent was also there, Basie Wessels, Dries van Koller, Les van Heerden, and a few others. 5SAI is situated north of the city of Grahamstown on the Bedford Road, just beyond the golf course. In 1965, it consisted of 5SAI, 84 Technical Services Depot, which was a storage depot for military ordnance and vehicles such as the old Saracen armored personnel carrier and the like. The base also housed the headquarters of 13 Combat Group, commanded by Brigadier Nijhuis. And this headquarters later became the headquarters of 6SAI. The base was also surrounded by an area about 2 kilometers wide, known as the Field Training Area. Now, everybody that knows 6SAI, remember the unit was now only 3 years old. The 6SAIs started in 1962. 1 SAI in Oudtshoorn, 2 SAI in Walvis Bay, 3 SAI in Potchefstroom, 4 SAI in Middelburg, now in Mpumalanga, 5 SAI in Ladysmith, Natal, and 6 SAI here in Grahamstown. So we were only really a few years old by the time I arrived there. And this Brigadier Nijhuis, he was in command of 13 Combat Group. We also didn't have any training area besides that 2 kilometers around the base. The FTA, we call it, Field Training Area. The farms surrounding us, later years were actually purchased and became what is part of 6SAI's training area today. Those are farms such as Burnt Kraal, which belonged to Piet Retief before he went to Natal, Botha's Post, and so on. We didn't have a field training area. We had to go get permission from the farmers to do it on their farms. And we didn't have a shooting range either. We had to go to Port Elizabeth to the shooting range, which I'll talk about a bit later on. The key personnel in the unit headquarters were the officer commanding, Commandant Hector Norton, and the second in command was a Major Neil Skuman, who was also a war veteran and a man that could that knew how to take a tipple or two. The adjutant, as I've said, was VeldKornet Smith, and the regimental sergeant major was W01 F.P. Smith, small ops, a great old man who looked after us and helped train the young subalterns in his regimental. This sergeant major, or RSM Smith, was a physical training instructor for many years at the Army College in Pretoria, hence the nickname. Years later, his son Tommy Smith was my adjutant at 5SAI in Ladysmith. The administrative officer was Major Ivor Dorrington, also a veteran and a great gentleman to boot. He would always try to keep the calm after formal dinner activities. The paymaster too was a very colourful old man, also an old vet, Captain Bok Passon. He could master taking a tipple during the day without anybody even seeing that he was getting getrek. God bless him. Just to get back to our RSM, the first extra duties that I got, the officers, if you were punished with extra duties, you had to move into the duty room and do your thing there until your extra duties had expired. And I remember early in my career at 6SAI, I had the audacity to cut the parade ground. There was various parade grounds, not the main one. I think it was Delta Company parade ground. I had the audacity to cut the corner of that parade ground without swinging my arms shoulder height. And I was halfway up towards the officers' club when somebody halted behind me. And I turned around and there stood Sergeant D.R.M. Toll, T-O-L-L. I'm going to talk about him now. And when I looked over his shoulder, there stood the RSM with his pay stick. And Toll said to me, "Sir, you cut the corner of the parade ground without swinging your arm shoulder height. Please report to the adjutant." which I did, and I received my first 7 extra duties, thanks to Small Ops Smith. But that was bringing up the young alterns. I never ever cut a parade ground again without swinging your arm shoulder height. I can't quite remember who the quartermaster was, but Staff Sergeant Lucas Mans played a dominant role. Our paths would cross again during our careers. The transport NCO was Staff Sergeant Brian Regan. His mense wat nou kopskud en sê ek onthou daai naam. Brian Regan was later commissioned as an officer and retired as a colonel years later. The South African Corps of Military Police, the MPs, consisted of a Sergeant Vermaak and a Corporal Besuidnout. We used to call them Brolocks and Bittergal. They were a highly efficient team. The former, that's now Sergeant Vermaak, was a groot man. He must have been about 280 pounds. Hy was so groot geweest, hy kon nie op 'n Triumph motorbike ry nie. Dis wat die MP's gery het, maar hy sit daai motorbike stukkend. They had to get him, I think, a special looking Harley Davidson. But anyway, Bittergal was about only third of his size, so jy het die groot ou gekry hierdie kleintjie. That was the MPs. Now we're ready to grab hold of these troops. Ons wil nou troepe oplei. Ons kom nou van die gym af. We are licensed to kill, but not according to Commandant Hector Norton. He said, and I hope the national servicemen of those days will appreciate this, there's no ways I'm letting 18 and 19-year-old leader group loose on my national servicemen unless I know that they can do the job properly. They might have the papers, but I want to see if they could do it or not. Jo, ons het daar redelik moeilik geweest daaroor. We were qualified, so what was this all about? So for the next 3 to almost 6 months, we had to do everything over again that we had done in the gym, just in a faster period. We were given an instructor, a VeldKornet McIntosh. A lot of paratroopers will remember him. He had also been commissioned the previous year with the 3 names I gave you earlier. He was a very good instructor, and he acted as the course leader, but he gave us section and platoon battle drills all over again. Brian Regan gave us driving and maintenance from scratch, even though we had our licenses. WO2 Corneels Haasbroek, he was a star, to say the least. He gave us drill and ceremonial drill all over again. And of course, each section head gave us their specialities like admin, log, signals, first aid, finances, and so on. Alles weer van vooraf. As part of the promotion policy, we had to complete battalion support weapon courses at the infantry school in Oudtshoorn. That is the 3-inch mortar, the anti-tank weapons, and the Vickers medium machine gun. We had to complete those 2 before we started training troops. We completed these, and only in July or August were we allowed, that's now what, almost 9 months, 10 months. Only then we were allowed to go and start training the national servicemen. After my support by 3-inch mortar course, I was appointed the mortar platoon commander with Staff Sergeant Boef van Dyk, LRS van Dyk, was my platoon sergeant. What a character. Now, the 3-inch mortars was at the headquarter company. There were 4 rifle companies, 1 headquarter company. Your support weapons, of which I was the 3-inch mortar, was with headquarter company, who was run by, guess who? VeldKornet L.E. Jordan, that became an officer a few months earlier in the Army Gymnasium. He was my company commander. And here's another name dropping. My company sergeant major was WO2 Lloyd Kalitz. Maybe the most, or the neatest, most precise infantryman that I think we all have ever met. And there were quite a few of them. Then we had the the 4 rifle companies. A company had VeldKornet Blackie Swart, so 'n lang maar wit kop. And his sergeant major, his company sergeant major was WO2 Daddy Godley. A lot of people remember Daddy Godley. And one of the guys that was in the gym with me, Nepgen, was an assistant VeldKornet with me. And unfortunately, towards the end of 1965, one of the troops in A company died of heat exhaustion, and Blackie Swart and Nepgen were charged with manslaughter, but were later found not guilty by the Grahamstown High Court. But that was a very traumatic period for us all. Daddy Godley was a real gentleman, and his wife, Ma Godley, was it now Ma genoemd, looked after all the young officers' needlework free of charge. The Godleys lived directly behind the officers' mess, and Ma would keep an eye on out for after-hour activities and might come around and say, "Julle jong offisiere het 'n bietjie hard geskree geslaan. Miskien te veel bier gedrink." That was Ma Godley. Then B company had VeldKornet George Chatwin as the commander, and WO2 Cornelis Haasbroek was the company sergeant major. Now, George Chatwin was killed on the sharp bend approaching the unit's entrance. When you came from the golf course, it was a sharp bend into the main gate. And he was killed later on that bend, on the Christmas Eve, I think. And I think at that stage, he was the second in command of the unit. He was a major by then. He also had the record of the fastest time from Grahamstown to Port Elizabeth on the old Grahamstown Road with his Renault Gordini. Weet jy wie hulle daai karre kan onthou nie. Cornelis Haasbroek also played a major role in the formative stages of our young officers' careers, always setting the example and being a role model to us with aspects such as discipline, parade ground drill, and the like. Charlie Company had VeldKornet Geldenhuys as the commander, and WO2 Vic Coleman was the company sergeant major. Gally was paralyzed years later and was wheelchair bound. Now, Vic Coleman, I'm going to tell you a story about now quickly. Vic Coleman was an amazing character. He was a giant of a man. But he had we thought he had a very small heart. We used to call him the laughing dove, because when he started getting excited or moerig, then he'd start sounding like a dove starting to wind himself up. And somewhere in the year after that, we arrived in Port Elizabeth on a shooting exercise at the Cape Recife rifle range. And when you had to go there, you stayed over at SAS Duncan. It was a naval base that I had actually done cadets in Port Elizabeth. And when we went down to shoot, we'd stay over at SAS Duncan. A lot of old wooden bungalows on the seafront, still there today. And I remember arriving there one day, and in the 1960s, the 50s and the 60s, Port Elizabeth had a motorbike gang called the Ducktails. Port Elizabeth will remember the Ducktails. Dit was hy hare wat so terug met die brilkrem. Die brilkrem gevat en dan trek jy jou, dan kam jy jou hare so terug. And the gang leader was a guy by the name of China and the Ducktails. Now, this Vic Coleman was a very dangerous character when he got into action. And now the story goes, when we arrived there, these motorbikes arrived, and China got off and asked, "Can he please speak to Mr. Coleman? He hears Mr. Coleman is in town." And that's when we all heard the story about a year or two before my arrival. Vic Coleman was sitting drinking, I'm sure, a lemonade in Happy Valley. Maybe you can remember the old Barrel Model cafe. Used to have the nicest milkshakes and cold beer. And apparently Vic Coleman was sitting there on the veranda when China and his Ducktails arrived. There was an altercation because he was in uniform. And something happened. But the story ends where these 6 were draped over their motorbikes. Vic Coleman spatting his hands and returning to the base. And they always paid respect to him when they heard he was in town to come and say hello to possibly the greatest street fighter Port Elizabeth has ever seen. And that was old Vic Coleman, great guy. More stories about him, not enough time. Then there was Delta Company, was commanded by VeldKornet Mike van der Berg. He's still alive. He's retired now here in Jeffreys Bay. With WO2 Bill Schaefer as the company sergeant major. You must remember in that period, excuse me, people came and people went. Piet Hall came from 13 Combat Group and joined 5SAI. Dries Stroewig, people are also going to remember him. As a matter of fact, this 13 Combat Group also had officers that stayed either married or stayed in the officers' mess with us. And that was Major Patterson came across from a 13 Combat Group to become our 2IC later on. There was a Major Petzold, an armored officer, and a VeldKornet Reg Otto, who, by the way, today, Koos, is the Tuesday the 6th, 5th.
Right.
He died, it's the 5th. Reg Otto died last night. And rest in peace, General. Our condolences, Kowie, ek sal vir jou later bel. But Reg Otto was a VeldKornet then also in Grahamstown. Koos, daar gaan daai ding weer, ek gaan hom net gou weer afsit. So we had other people arriving, other people serving. We had people like Captain Dan Lambrecht. We had Captain L. Du Plessis. Dries Stroewig, as I mentioned, Martin Reynolds. They all came and went as company commanders in the time that I was there. Leon Wessels and I were in one room. And I remember we bought a Philips record player. And we soon amassed a few long LPs. 33 and a third speed, and the Beatles was our main source of entertainment. Needless to say, our den became the center of after-hour musical meetings, accompanied by copious amounts of Lion Lager, selling at, listen to this, R4.80 a case of 24. That's 20 cents a dumpy. There were small little dumpies with a short little neck. If you bought the tins, you also got that little machine that you used to open the tins with. So there it was, R4.80 a dumpy, sorry, a case of dumpies. The old Imperial tot, it was about a little bit like a double tot plus of hardtack, was selling at 8 cents a tot, and a mixture, or a mixer rather, like a Coke or whatever, was a further 5 cents. We were all mainly beer drinkers though. I remember I got 80 Rand out per month after mess fees and regimental fee deductions. And of this, I could still save 20 Rand in a post office bookie. Kry so 'n stempeltjie as jy hom geld ingesit het. I could soon afford to buy my first mode of transport. Miss Fullard's Morris Minor. Miss Fullard was my mom's boss here at Castle Wine in Port Elizabeth. And I bought that Morris Minor, a 1958 model, for $75. I gave a 25 Rand deposit, and I paid the other off over a period, I think it was 4 months. It was a 1958 model, as I said, and we dubbed it the Morris Mustang, so a klein swart Morris Minertjie. After completing the 3-inch mortar course in Oudtshoorn, I was appointed the unit's mortar platoon commander, and Sergeant Leon LRS Boef van Dyk was my platoon sergeant. He was a large man in body and in character, and we clicked from the word go, relating to the same types of things in life and enjoying each other's sense of humor. He taught me that being a strict disciplinarian, but still looking after your subordinates with all you had, was the key to good military leadership. You must remember, we're only growing up now, because nog eens 19 jaar oud nie. The old 3-inch mortar was not calibrated, and its successor, the 81mm mortar, was quite something, which was still under wraps at the infantry school. I mentioned Warrant Officer Spoegies Steenkamp in the first meeting, and when I was on the 3-inch mortar course, he still opened up the weapons store and said, there it is, there's the new Hotchkiss Brandt 81mm mortar, which to us was quite unbelievable. Boef and I spent hours on the training of our platoon, using, amongst others, the sand bombs on a grid laid out with string, perfecting the platoon's ability to master fire control and the rest. The 3-inch mortar had a cut barrel, enabling one to go through the drills without really firing the real thing. Sestasse actie. That got the show on the road, and soon we had the platoon to be proud of. We came second that year to 2 South African Infantry Battalion in Walvis Bay during the annual combat trials in Oudtshoorn. Excuse me. The non-commissioned officers of the unit also played a major role in our formative years. They were hard-working, hard-drinking, eccentric and dedicated men who formed the backbone of any unit. The support platoon sergeants were Boef van Dijk of the mortars, CJ Wessels with the anti-tank, and Mike, whose name I have forgotten, please somebody help, was at the Vickers machine guns. Sergeant Benties Kromhout took over the platoon from Mike the following year. The rifle companies had sergeants like Dior M. Tol, an eccentric, well-read man. What a character he was. He was a great reader, and before I left 5SAI, he presented me with this book, which is The Barrack Room Ballads and Other Poems by Rudyard Kipling. And in the front there stands Dr. M. Tol, and I see he paid 85 cents for it. A book that I will, well, it will be a heirloom in my family for hopefully very many decades, and if not longer. And then there was a little story in here that became famous. Our soldiers knew this, Rudyard Kipling, back to front. It went about Tommy. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tommy by Rudyard Kipling. Especially now when there's so little honor given to the vets in South Africa. I want to read you the last little chapter, or the last little verse rather. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and chuck him out, the brute. But it's savior of his country when the guns begin to shoot. And it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and anything you please. And Tommy ain't a blooming fool. You bet that Tommy sees. So that is dedicated to the vets that don't really get the honor that should be bestowed upon you or us. That was Dr. M. Tol. He could never get a driver's license. He didn't have the coordination to drive a truck properly. Only years later, I think he was a warrant officer already, that Sergeant Dr. M. Tol get his driver's license. By the way, he was also a member of the French Foreign Legion for a while, was Dr. M. Tol. I don't know if he's still alive, but he made a great impression on us. Then you had other names like Dolla de Toy and Brille Hubert. Those are the guys that formed us as we grew up. Back at the officers' mess, we were settled into a routine of early rise, work, more work, few snorts at the mess at night, blissful rest. We worked until 12 o'clock on Saturdays when there was inspections, and had the rest of the weekend off to recuperate. Sunday mornings, Veldkornet Johan Kraus, his father was the commissioner of police, Generaal Kraus. Jy sal miskien onthou Koos. Sy seun Johan was also with us. And they used to drive down to Port Alfred on a Sunday morning with streepsakke and fill them with mussels, return to the base, and on Sunday mornings we would wake up and then drink our beer and eat these mussels galore. Then we also had on Saturday afternoons, I can remember. I had photos of this, but they're gone now. We used to clean our motor cars, the klein teenagertjies. Ons het elkeen ons motorkar gehad. I had my Morris, as I said, and I eventually, about a year later, I replaced that with a Volvo. Then I ronnerig Volvos. That was yours truly. It was a left-hand drive, 3-speed Actibulaget B18. So a Roy engine. And all the pipes were brass, and that used to be cleaned on Saturdays. Then we had things like Leon had a brand new Vauxhall Viva. Piet Miller arrived at the unit with a red Triumph sports car. Windgat, Buddy. Dries van Kolder had a grey Taunus. Kan julle die Taunus onthou? And so on. Johan Foster, Brigadier General Foster, arrived a few months after us, having been commissioned in Cape Town Regiment. And on being taken on orders, he didn't have a beret to wear. And I think that's where he picked up his first extra duties. The esprit de corps that we had in that unit was formidable, and it was a formidable team. We used to go to Bioscope, either down at the YM or the Odeon or at His Majesty's in Grahamstown. The corps in the army that is evaluated by every member of the unit 3 times a day, every day of the year, is the catering corps, the chefs. And I think I'm going to stop and just repeat that. That's the only corps that gets evaluated 3 times a day by everybody every single day of the year. And I was to respect them throughout my career. And thereafter, at 6SAI 001, Smiler Collins, what a character, was the chief, or the chef rather, in control of the messes in the unit. He was one of the 3 master chefs in the SADF, and he was very proud of that fact. Sergeants Henty Nell and Daddy Stamps were his chief caterers. To save time at lunch, we would go for lunch at the officers' club. Now, to save time, you would say to the waiter, old Wilson, bring me a combine, please. Combine meaning put your fish and your whatever main course, put that on one plate. And Smiler Collins, the gentleman that he was, came to us young officers and said, it's unbecoming of an officer and a gentleman to order a combine. And you will be surprised to see what's going to happen if you do that again. Because typically you're going to burn your fingers. So we ordered a combine. And here comes Wilson with a soup, the soapboard, soup in it, and the fish, and everything, and the jam, and alles in een bloody bordie voor jou. And that was the last time that we ever ordered a combine. God bless old Smiler Collins. We used to have Batman. Your British organization had it that each officer had a Batman. Your junior officers, you were 2 to 3 officers per Batman. And that Batman used to do everything. He used to bone your Sam Browns. He used to clean your putties. He used to clean your belts. He used to bone your shoes. He used to clean your room. What great guys. We had 2 of them, Eric and Daniel. And Daniel wasn't only a good Batman, he was an amazing caddy up at the golf course just above us. And when I left there, Daniel, the Batman, could actually play on a 9 handicap. So those were also great things that get stuck in your mind. Sport-wise, Leon Wessels and Johan Foster, they were the squash. We had a squash court. They were the squash guys, the guys to beat rather. And we used to go once a year for the 3 years I was there. Either we would go to the Mortar, where the flying school was for the Harvards, or they would fly down to us, and we would play squash against each other. Of course, with all the extra refreshments and imbibing that took place thereafter. I remember the girls of TC Training College, Teachers College, TC College. It was a separate then. Just after we left, it became part of Rhodes University. But there were 400 girls between the age of, my vrou gaan my nou hierso op my oorklap, geseter daarvan. There were 400 girls between 18 and 22 that we, on Friday nights, we used to go and join. We went to sessions. Remember the sessions those days? You had live bands playing, and die tannies teen die mure, the girls would sit there one side, you would sit here one side, and then you would dance with each other and so on. And those were great days. TC Training College. We also used to go down to, with that various motor cars I was telling you about, we used to go down in convoy to Port Alfred, because 5SAI had a little beach cottage there. And we used to go down to the beach every now and again on a Sunday when we had the time to do so. Now, those were great days. Then I want to tell you one little story about, I was on duty one night, maybe one of my extras, on a Sunday evening, and a troop comes back from East London, but you can see he's been buffed up a little bit. Die ou het 'n bietjie seer gekry. And eventually I asked him, now, where did this happen? Now, Rhodes students passed remarks at him when he came into town, and he defended himself. So I said, okay, toe kry ek nou vir ou groot Brollocks en Bittergal, die MPs. And our Sergeant Vermaak came into the duty room, and he phoned the police. Waar jy vandaan kom, Koos? And he said to the police, listen, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to take a platoon of troops in the Bedford, and we're going to go down to town now. And I'm going to break those guys up into 2 or 3 troops. But so rug teen rug staan, and I'll take your web out. I mean, nothing could stop that. And then we are going to talk to the Rhodes students in soft, sweet words of love. And so we did so. And as these altercations took place, so the police would arrive, they would arrest the students, take them to jail. Vermaak would arrest the troops, take them around the corner and let them loose again. And that's how we sorted out the Rhodes students. Maybe somebody watching this one day was on the student side. Sorry, I think julle het op julle boer gekry daai dag. Little stories that I can remember. Koos, as ek te veel vloek, moet jy maar beep ergens, joh. Right. Then, of course, we had these massive semi-formals where you got dressed in a different blue uniform. It was called undress blues. And for your formal dinners, you got dressed in your mess kit, which was amazing. I still don't have photos. I do have. I got married in one. I'll show you my marriage photo later on where I got married in this, in the mess dress. Those formal dinners too were just quite amazing. I'm not going to go into that again. Then I was starting to come towards the end of my stay there. Commandant Norton was transferred, and a Major Floors Patterson. He came from 13 Combat Group. Hy was nou sommer straight. Everybody will know that, and all due respect to, he passed away, I think, in 1975 at the age of 48. Yeah, he was a very highly strung guy. En hy was hoog bedonderd geweest. And he came in and things didn't go all that well in his time. I remember those days, you had to ask the officer commanding's permission to get married. It was a British tradition. And he took that very literal. And when Smiley Strydom wanted to marry Dawn Pascoe, his fiancée, after everything had been organized already, we thought this is just, a way of doing it the proper way. On the Friday before the wedding, Smiley went and asked permission to get married. And Floris Patterson said, I want to see your bank account, please. And when he presented the bank account, Floris Patterson said, there's no ways you can look after a wife. And that was the end of the wedding. Alles was off. The catering, the tutti was off. That was the man old Floris was. God bless him. He was a very strict soldier, but sometimes overdid it a bit. Then, because of that, just before I was transferred, Commandant Charles Lloyd, you'll see it, all those names you'll see on the officers' names that I'm going to send you the photos. You'll see Charles Lloyd took over on the 1st of December, 1967. But he was my commander before I left in November for about 6 weeks, where he was just getting used to. He was a temporary commander after Patterson had been relieved of his command. I'm sorry I have to put it this way, but I mean, that's history and that's what happened. You kan nie die feite verbloem nie. Then I remember the weddings. I was becoming, my mother was becoming worried because I was in Grahamstown, the best man for two of my buddies. That was Dan Kershoff, who died very many years ago, married Eve Henderson. And who was the second one? Dries van Coller, who married Monica. Dries was also murdered on his building site years later. Monica is now married to the Mike van den Berg I spoke about from Delta Company, who is now retired in Jeffreys Bay. Years later, I also became when I went to Kimberley, I was the best man for Leon Wessels, my old buddy, and then to RS Oosthuizen on Groot Oos. And my maat gesê, if you get the best man for 4, you're never going to get married. Dan gaan sy nie kleinkinders hê nie, but that wasn't the case. In those days, South Africa had sanctions, or the starting of the sanctions, and we had petrol dumps all over South Africa where the reserve petrol was put into. I know there was in Standerton and so on, but we had 2 that Grahamstown serviced. It was total petrol depots, TOTAL. One was in Rosmead, near Middelburg in the Cape, and one was in Beaufort West. And you used to take your platoon for 2 to 3 months, and you would go and guard those depots. Now you're a little one, Papa. And I'm mentioning this now because going to a base like that, at your age, 18, 19, 20 years old, you learned how to command a base, a minor, in small ways you learn to start using or learning how rather to command a base and how to run a base. Rosmead was one of them. I'm mentioning Rosmead now because it was a little base, and his name was Henny Coetzee, was the total commander, or rather manager. Yes, and we had to look after these bases. In Rosmead, that's where I bought my motor car, the Volvo, and picked up a lot of experience on commanding for the future. Rosmead also had a little extra sleeping quarters because at that stage, the new Bedford trucks were being made or constructed rather in Port Elizabeth, And as these convoys of Bedfords moved into Pretoria and all over, they would stay over in Rosmead. And that's where I also met quite a lot of people. That is the end of that little piece. Now, what I've written here, I stopped writing these memoirs in 2009, promising myself to continue when I had the time to do so. Well, here it is, 2020, at the start of the coronavirus lockdown. The world is in serious crisis. God be with us. Dis wat ek nou hierso geskryf het. That was now 2 years ago. And we're over that. My last piece quickly of 5SAI. South Africa became a republic in 1961. The government planned a massive parade in Pretoria to celebrate the occasion in May 1966. A special tarred road was built just south of the Voortrekker Monument, aptly named Eufeesweg. Hy's nog steeds daar, obviously. This was to be used as the route to be taken by marching and vehicle columns on the day of the parade. 18,000 troops were called up to participate and were billeted on Speskop in Voortrekker Hoogte, close to the infamous detention barracks. Speskop is up in the high ground. That's where later on Special Forces headquarters was built. There was a massive open area there. And that's where this division, if you will, of 18,000 troops moved in. Brigadier Burger was the commander and Colonel Dick Peddle was his 2IC. A lot of old soldiers are going to remember these names. I was appointed as assistant VeldKornet, as the personal assistant or PA to Colonel Peddle at that time of that parade. A massive amount of planning and rehearsal went into the 2 weeks build up to that parade. There are still videos available of that parade where we commemorated the first 5 years of being a republic. Now, the tragedy that happened that day was, as the leading Panhard armored car with Brigadier Burger in the turret turned to its right, the brigadier slumped to his left and was dead from a heart attack. He died in the Panhard vehicle. And as the vehicle turned to the right, the chopper landed. I'll never forget that. I was standing next to Colonel Peddle. And he had apparently started showing signs of stress as he had passed the saluting base where PW Mortar was taking the salute. And I remember Colonel Peddle turning to me and saying, he used to call me Mr. Harris. I think we have some serious work to do now, Mr. Harris. Let's go. And that was on the death of Brigadier Burger at that parade. I look back at my years at 5SAI with very fond memories. The unit and its members having helped to form me and my colleagues, preparing us for our military careers. During September of 1967, just after my 21st birthday, I was informed that Leon Wessels and I had been earmarked to be founder members of a new unit in Kimberley, established to specifically train the massive commando force in the SADF. About 206 units nationwide had to be trained from section leader level up to command or unit commander level, as well as support elements within those units. A massive backlog had emerged in the commando unit's efficiency due to the lack of structured training. The Commando Combat School was in the making. Dit is waar ou Boris toe later aan jare bevelvoerder was. By the way, yeah, I'm not going to say that by the way. Leon and I were not impressed at having been transferred. I can remember him and I saying, there's no ways we're leaving 5SAI. If they transfer us, we're going to go and work for OK Bazaars. As a matter of fact, we actually went and applied for a job at the OK Bazaars. Unfortunately, we never got it. So that was the end of 6SAI. Very many more stories to say or to tell, but that's my contribution, Koos.
But I want to say to you, sir, I'm very glad that you taught those road students a few manners in life. I hope we did them well. You know, a student, I dealt with him in the police, I can tell you in the appropriate way, and which is the most violent way, and it worked. It worked very well.
That is, they didn't try the nonsense again.
Well, Internet, we come to the end of this episode. General, I wish to thank you. Thank you for your time once again. It is so that our comrades, our veterans, are getting older and older. And today we have a loss of Lieutenant General Reg Otter. And he was actually chief of the South African Army. Wonderful man. And I think at the end of this episode, we will play the last step too, while we think of a general. And we send our condolences to his family as well. So until we meet again, God bless.